Hi everybody, now we are in week 10 and this week we are going to learn a very important concept, unemployment. And as you know, losing a job can be the most distressing economic event in a person's life, and most of us rely on our labor earnings to maintain our standard of living. And many of you get a sense of personal accomplishment from working. So job loss means a lot to a person. It means a lower living standard, anxiety about the future, reduced self-esteem. So that's the reason that politicians, political campaigns usually focus on unemployment and how to deal with unemployment most of the time, and they talk about how to create jobs. So in previous chapters, we have seen many of the forces that determine level and growth of a country's standard of living. A country that saves and invests a high fraction of its income enjoys more rapid growth in its capital stock and GDP than a similar country that saves and invests less. And even more obvious determinant of country's standard of living is the amount of unemployment it typically experiences. People who would like to work but cannot find a job are not contributing to the economy's production of goods and services. Okay? Although some degree of unemployment in an economy is inevitable, we will talk about the reasons why this is the case, the amount of unemployment varies substantially over time and across countries. And when a country keeps its workers as fully employed as possible, it achieves a higher GDP, level of GDP, that means everybody is producing, then it would if it left many of its workers idle. So, in this chapter, first we will understand the definition of unemployment, and then we will look at the reasons why we have an unemployment in the economy, and we will learn some kind of unemployment is inevitable. We have it even in good times. And then we will talk about the reasons and policies that we can decrease the amount of unemployment. So, measuring unemployment, it is the job of Bureau of Labor Statistics, which is part of Department of Labor. And every month, the BLS, Bureau of Labor Statistics, produces data on unemployment and on other aspects of the labor market, including types of unemployment, length of average work week, and the duration of unemployment. And where these data come? These data comes from a regular survey of about 60,000 households called the Current Population Survey. Okay? And the answers of this survey, the BLS places each adult, when we say adult, is age 16 years old and older, in each surveyed household into these following categories. The first one is employed. This category includes those who work as paid employees, work in their own business, or work as unpaid workers in a family member's business. Okay, paid employees, self-employed, and unpaid workers in a family business are categorized as employed. And the second category is unemployed. Unemployed, this category includes those who were not employed, were available for work, and had tried to find employment during the previous 4 weeks. And it also includes those waiting to be recalled to a job from which they had been laid off. So this unemployment definition is a little bit tricky because somebody doesn't have a job doesn't mean that he or she is unemployed. Okay, you have to be careful. That person should look for a job or had tried to find employment during the previous 4 weeks so that we can consider that person as unemployed. And the last category is not in the labor force. This category includes those who fit neither of the first two categories, such as full-time students, homemakers, and retirees. So they are not employed, they are not looking for a job, so they are considered as not in the labor force. Once the BLS has placed all the individuals covered by the survey in a category, it computes various statistics to summarize the state of the labor market. Let's first start with what is labor force. Labor force, let's write it here, labor force. We can symbolize this with LF, labor force, is equal to employed, sum of employed people, plus sum of plus unemployed people. So it's the sum of employed and unemployed people. And the BLS defines unemployment as the percentage of labor force that is unemployed. So how we are going to find U rate? U rate is the short version of unemployment rate. 100 is necessary to find a percentage. 100 times number of unemployed people divided by labor force. Instead of labor force, you can write it here employed plus unemployed people. Okay? And the BLS computes unemployment rates for the entire adult population and for more narrowly defined groups such as blacks, whites, men and women, and so on. And BLS uses the same survey to produce data on labor force participation. What is labor force participation? It's the percentage of adult population that is in the labor force. What is adult population? It's the sum of all categories: employed, not employed, unemployed, plus not in the labor force. Okay, so the total, all these categories, is called adult population, and percentage of the adult population that is in the labor force is considered as labor force participation rate. So if we make an example, we will understand it better. In this example, the example asks you to compute the labor force, unemployment rate, adult population, and labor force participation rate using the data by September 2013. Okay, let's look at the data. Number of employed, 144.3 million. Number of unemployed, 11.3 million. Not in labor force, 90.6 million. First, let's make this small and try to find out each part separately. First, labor force. Labor force is easy. If you know the definition, it is the sum of employed people and unemployed people. So labor force will be employed plus unemployed. So labor force will be 144.3 employed people million plus 11.3. So the labor force is going to be 155.6 million people. First one is done. Now the next thing is we are going to find U rate. What is U rate? U rate, you can always write the equations in front of you or the formulas. 100 is for percentage times number of unemployed people. Number of unemployed people is 11.3 divided by number of people that are in the labor force, 155.6. So you can use your calculator to find out this number, but if you do this calculation, you will find 7.3% is the unemployed people in this economy. Okay. Next one is adult population. What is adult population? I said that it is the sum of labor force and not in the labor force. That means all categories sum up together. Adult population is going to be 155.6 plus 90.6 million, which will bring you the number 246.2. 246.2 people is the adult population. Okay, that much easy. And the last part, the question is asking what is labor force participation rate. Let me erase some parts here and then write the labor force participation rate. Okay. Labor force, okay, let me correct. Labor force participation rate, LFPR, is equal to 100 times number of labor force divided by adult population. So 100 times 155.6 divided by 240, again wrong, 246.2, which will give you the number around 63%. So that means 63% of the adult population is either employed or unemployed looking for a job. Okay, that's how we solve this kind of problems. You can find the answers here. And the BLS publishes these statistics not only just for unemployed and employed, but for different demographic groups within the population. And these data reveal that there are wide differences, labor market experiences differences for different groups. Let's start with the first one. So when you look at this data, you will see the adults 20 years and older, unemployment rate and labor force participation rate based on gender and based on white and black. So two comparisons are most apparent when you look at this table. First, women of prime working age, 20 to 54 years old, have lower rates of labor force participation rate than men. Okay, for white female, you see 58 compared to 72.6. For black female, 61 compared to almost 68%. And the second important point here is that once they are in the labor force, men and women have similar rates of unemployment. So look at the unemployment rate. For female is 5.5%, male for 6.1%, for black female 10 compared to black male 14%. And the second important point, prime age blacks have similar rates of labor force participation as prime age whites, but they have much higher rates of unemployment. Look at the participation rate. Compare black and white male, 72 to 68. They are very close. Or black female and white female, 58 to 61. They have similar participation rates. But once they are in the labor market, look at their unemployment rate. Black male 14 compared to 6.1. Black female 10 compared to 5.5. So as you see, their unemployment rate is higher for black male and black female. Okay. Next, when you look at the teens data, you see that their labor force participation rate is very low, 36.7 to 29.4, but you can still see the differences in unemployment rate for teens too, between different colors, white and black. 19.3% unemployment rate for white, and for black it's 35.1%, almost twice the amount. And when you look at different other ethnicities, Asian and Hispanic, labor force participation is very similar between Asian and Hispanic, 61.1 to 65.1 and 65.8, but there are differences for unemployment rate, 5.3% for Asian, for Hispanics it's 9%. And also labor force statistics you can see by education level, and what you will realize that labor force participation rate increases with the education level. More people participate in the looking for a job or employed if they are educated. And unemployment rate decreases with the education compared to less than high school, 10.3% to 3.7% with bachelor's degree or more. And this is a very interesting picture. It shows labor participation rates by sex as a historical data since 1950 to 2012. And when you look at this picture, you'll realize that you can be able to read the data first of all. When you look at this graph, just after World War II, which is around 1950s, men and women had very different roles in society. Only when you look at the data, you see that 1950s, only 33% of women were working and looking for a job. In contrast to 87% of the men, they are either working or looking for a job. Over the past 60 years, when the time passes over this past 60 years, the difference in participation rates has gradually diminished as growing numbers of women have entered the labor force and some men have left it. Data for 2012 show that 58% of women were in the labor force, 58 you see here, compared to 70% of the men. So men from 87 to 70, women 33 to 58, okay? So maybe when you think about why female participation rate increased, you can easily find out the reasons. First of all, women's role in American society has changed dramatically over the past century. It may be attributable to new technologies such as the washing machine, clothes dryer, refrigerator, freezer, dishwasher, which actually reduced the amount of time required to complete routine household tasks. So female has more time to work for. And it's also can be explained by improved birth control, which has reduced the number of children born to typical family. And also this change in women's role is also partly because of changing political and social attitudes, which in turn may have facilitated by the advances in technology and birth control. So these changes actually change the labor force participation rate for female. But for men, it's not more clear, right? Because male participation rate, labor force participation rate, decreased from 87 to around 70%. And it's not easy to explain this fall in men's participation rate. There may be several reasons for this decline. First, young men now stay in school longer than their fathers and grandfathers. They go schooling longer. Second, older men now retire earlier and live longer. And third, with more women employed and more fathers now stay at home to raise their children. So that means male also share the housework with female. It makes the decrease, it can explain the decrease in labor force participation rate.